The wind in Mercy, Arizona, didn't just blow, it scraped. It had a memory, the kind that chewed through wood and whispered sins through cracks in the walls. It carried dust the color of dried blood and sometimes bones too small to name. By 1886, the town had emptied of its decency, drained like a jug with a hole in the bottom. Mercy used to be a mining town, then a cattle stop, then a resting place for the men too broken to move on. Now it was barely anything. A crooked street of shuttered windows, dry wells, and two saloons that never closed because no one sober ever walked out of them. And into this town came Elias Finch. He rode in on a worn roan with a faded saddle and a coat too long for summer. He had a scar high on his cheek, like someone once tried to carve a map into his face and lost their way. His hat was low, and he looked at people like they might already be dead. Mercy didn't trust new men, not since Sheriff Varner was found gutted behind the stables and the banker disappeared with half the town's ledgers. But Elias wasn't new. Not to them. He'd left Mercy 12 years ago, in a rainstorm they still whispered about. The kind that took cattle, babies, and two horses clean off the riverbank. Back then, Elias had worn a deputy's badge under Sheriff Varner. He was clean-faced and steady, known for dragging drunks out of fights with more grace than grit. Then his younger brother, Samuel, was shot in the back over a card game in the busted Coin Saloon. Shot by a man nobody saw and everybody lied for. Elias buried Samuel and didn't say a word, not to the sheriff, not to the preacher. He left the next morning, and no one expected him back. But he came back, and this time, he walked into Mercy like he meant to bury something deeper. The first to notice him was Agnes Crow, who ran the general store now that her father was rotting in Boot Hill. She saw him tie his horse slow and purposeful, the way you do when you know a lot of things could go wrong soon. She watched him push through the store's battered door and take off his hat like someone taught him manners too young to forget. "You ain't changed much," she said, half truth, half lie. Elias nodded once. "You have." She looked older, harder. There were streaks of white in her black hair and lines around her mouth that hadn't been there when they were kids passing notes behind the schoolhouse. "What brings you back?" she asked. He didn't answer, just bought a sack of coffee beans, 6 rounds of .44, and a can of kerosene. By sundown, the town knew. Elias Finch was back. That night he stayed in the empty rectory behind the broken church. The preacher had been shot 2 years ago for preaching against the saloon's protection racket. They found his Bible split down the middle by a bullet and his eyes open to the rafters. No one had filled the pulpit since. Elias didn't light a lamp. He sat in the dark, listening to the creak of the town dying around him. In the saloon, men whispered, "Finch is back. I heard he fought with the Apache down by San Carlos. Nah, he was a lawman in Texas, hung 3 rustlers with his own hands. He ain't here to drink." No, he was. Mercy had a sheriff now, but not one that wore a badge. Silas Vex ran the town from a corner table in the Dust House saloon. He was lean, sharp-jawed, and ran the protection racket with hands that never showed blood. He smiled with his lips, not his eyes. Vex had come to Mercy 5 years after Elias left, took control with cheap whiskey and cheaper bullets. He didn't need to run for office. He just made folks afraid to open their doors after sundown. His men did the rest. They called themselves the Dogs, 12 men, each with a mean streak and a taste for cruelty. They didn't bother hiding it. Nobody had stopped them yet. The second day, Elias went to the stables and found his old saddlebag where he'd buried it behind the loft beam. Inside was a star. The badge was tarnished and bent. He held it a long while before tucking it into his coat. Don't go flashing that thing, said an old man in the corner, chewing on tobacco like it owed him money. Elias didn't look up, not planning to. He spent the rest of the day walking the perimeter of the town. He passed boarded homes, broken fences, and the old schoolhouse now empty of everything but dust. Kids didn't stay in Mercy. They either died or were sold off to miners in Gristle Ridge, 2 towns west. He found a dog dead in the alley, ribs out, eyes dry. He moved it to the shade. That evening, he knocked on Agnes's door. "I need names," he said. She didn't ask for what. She just stepped aside and poured 2 cups of boiled chicory. They run everything now. Vex his men. Some call them the dogs, some just call them death. I remember one of 'em, Dalton, the one with the rabbit scar on his neck. He was in town the night Samuel got shot. Agnes nodded. He's still around, worse now. I need a place high up, overlook. Schoolhouse roof. South corner gives you a view of the whole street, but it's weak. Wood's rotten. You'll fall if you're not careful. I won't. That night he climbed the schoolhouse, sat cross-legged for hours, watched who walked where, counted movements. Vex had 3 men stationed on rooftops, 2 outside the saloon, 1 near the church. 6 more rotated through town, shaking down storekeepers, taking girls from the boarding house, laughing like hyenas under the moon. By the 4th night, Elias had mapped every step, every lantern that stayed lit, every window that never opened. On the 5th morning, Dalton was found dead behind the saloon, shot twice in the throat. No one saw who did it. The dogs didn't speak of it, but their eyes watched every shadow tighter. Vex didn't move. He smiled like he knew something, but even his glass went untouched that night. Agnes found Elias behind the rectory. "That was stupid," she said. "It was necessary. They'll come for you. I hope they do." She stared at him. Why now, after all this time? Elias looked past her to where the sun was climbing over Mercy's bones. Because Samuel was the only one in this town worth saving, and they buried him like a stray. She said nothing. They think I'm just another cowboy, another man with dust in his teeth and nothing in his heart, but they're wrong. And what are you then? He looked at her with eyes hollowed by too many years. The last good man in a town that forgot what good even meant. And then he turned, loaded his revolver slow, and waited for night. When night came, Mercy pulled its shadows closer like an old woman clutching a threadbare shawl. The wind died down to a breath, and the saloon lamps glowed greasy against the dark. The streets lay empty but restless, like something waited just out of sight. Elias moved through it all like he belonged to the dark. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't fast. He was patient, the kind of patience that grows in a man who's buried more than he's saved. The town was a map of dangers he already knew by heart. He didn't strike again immediately. Instead, he worked the edges. He fixed the loose hinges on Agnes's door, quietly replaced the cracked windows in the general store, dug the graves of 2 children found behind the livery, their small bodies stiff with sickness or worse. He built their markers from scrap wood, carving their names when no one else dared to remember them. Mercy noticed a little. The dogs noticed more. 2 of them, Brackett and Sweeney, picked up his trail. They weren't smart men, but they had the meanness to make up for it. They cornered Elias behind the blacksmith's shed on the 7th night. He didn't look surprised to see them. Brackett spat into the dirt. "You got a death wish, Finch, picking off Dalton like he was nothing." Sweeney grinned wide, teeth rotted and brown. Boss says you can leave if you crawl, elsewise we'll put you under like the preacher. Elias didn't speak. He just watched them, one hand resting near his belt buckle, slow as an old habit. Brackett pulled his gun first. Sweeney barely had time to blink before Elias shot Brackett through the heart. The sound was heavy and sudden, like a hammer falling on wet clay. Sweeney tried to scream but took a bullet through the mouth. He stumbled back, knocking over a barrel of sour water, and died with his fingers twitching in the dirt. No one came running. In mercy, gunshots didn't bring help anymore. They brought curtains shutting tight. Elias stood over the bodies for a long minute. Then he dragged them behind the smithy and left them for the morning to find. The next day, the Dust House saloon ran quiet. Vex sat at his usual table, hands folded, smiling without joy. His men shifted nervously behind him. Even the piano player kept his hands off the keys. Agnes closed her shop early and rode out to the edge of town, where the stones gave way to nothing but endless badland. She found Elias sitting on the old boundary fence, hat low, the wind tugging at the hem of his coat. "You're painting a target on your back," she said, swinging down from her mule. He didn't answer right away, just watched a pair of vultures circle low over the dry hills. "Maybe that's the point," he said at last. Agnes kicked at a dead clump of grass. "You're one man, mercy's too far gone." "No such thing." She shook her head. "It'll kill you." "Maybe. And then who'll be left to remember we weren't always this way?" He turned then, sharp and sudden. His face was not angry but hollow, like a well run dry. "You will," he said. "You have to." She looked at him hard, like trying to read something written deep in the wrinkles of his coat, the set of his mouth. Then she handed him a small bundle, wrapped in oilcloth. "Dynamite," she said. "Saved it from the old mining days." He nodded, took it without a word. They didn't touch. No one in Mercy touched any more unless it was to hurt. That night, Elias made his real move. He waited until Vex's men were good and drunk, staggering from the dust house to the boarding house like dogs sniffing for scraps. Then he crept to the stables. He set charges under the dogs' horses first, knowing that men on foot fought like crippled wolves. He planted the rest beneath the saloon itself, in the soft earth where the foundation had rotted from too many wet seasons. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't even justice. It was correction, pure and simple. At dawn, when the town stirred, the ground shuddered once and then heaved. The dust house saloon buckled inward, burying half of Vex's men in a roar of broken wood and screaming steel. Horses fled in all directions, wild-eyed and half-mad. People staggered into the street, faces slack with disbelief. In the smoke and panic, Elias moved like a shadow. He found Clancy, the one who beat old widow Parsons near to death last winter, and snapped his neck with a clean twist. He shot Greaves through the knee and left him crying in the dirt. He pinned Jonah's pike to the church's broken cross and let him bleed out slow, his gurgling prayers swallowed by the rising sun. Mercy wasn't cheering. Mercy was terrified. Vex survived. Of course he did. He wasn't in the dust house that night. He'd been gambling in the back room of the boarding house, untouched by the blast. By midday, he rallied what few dogs remained and put a bounty on Elias Finch, so high even the town's cowards picked up rifles with shaking hands. Elias didn't run. He made his stand at the old schoolhouse, the same roof where he first mapped their movements. He boarded the windows, rigged the doors, stacked his ammunition neat and deliberate. Agnes brought him water and biscuits without asking questions. Some of the townsfolk, those who still had a little spine left, started leaving canned goods or bullets at the edge of the schoolyard. No one spoke to him. No one had to. He was the last good man in Mercy, and even the town's broken heart remembered what that was supposed to mean. Vex didn't wait long. 3 days after the dust house fell, he brought everything he had to the schoolhouse gates. A dozen hired guns, bounty hunters, old ranch hands too stupid or too desperate to say no. They had rifles, pistols, even a Gatling gun mounted on a wagon. Agnes watched from the general store's roof, heart hammering so loud she thought they might hear it. Elias stood in the schoolhouse doorway, shotgun in one hand, revolver in the other. The standoff began. The first shot came from a boy too young to shave, his rifle shaking as he fired from behind a hitching post. The bullet hit the schoolhouse door and splintered wood into the dry wind. He reloaded with shaking hands and ducked low again. Elias didn't fire. Not yet. He waited until they all revealed themselves. 12 men spread across Main Street, crouched behind barrels and broken wagons. The Gatling gun mounted atop a hay cart that reeked of mule sweat and blood. Then he moved. The shotgun roared once, knocking a gunman back into the dust with a rib cage caved inward. Then Elias was gone from the door, slipping through the schoolhouse like a whisper of smoke. They fired wildly, bullets punching holes through the siding, but Elias was already on the side stairs, rifle slung and pistol steady. He dropped the next man, an old bounty killer with a patch over one eye, clean through the throat. Blood fanned out across the dirt as the man folded. The Gatling gun opened up. Rounds tore into the face of the schoolhouse, chewing wood like wet paper. Children's drawings still clung to the inside walls, faded chalk angels now shredded by machine fire. Glass shattered, dust boiled. Elias crawled beneath the floorboards, emerging behind the porch, where he lobbed 2 sticks of dynamite beneath the wagon. He didn't wait for the blast. He ran. The explosion sent the haycart into the air like a snapped bone. The gunner's body flailed midair before crashing against the side of the saloon ruins, reduced to meat and smoke. Half the street caught fire. Screams followed. A man tried to run for cover. Elias dropped him. Another fired blindly through the rising smoke. Elias flanked him and slit his throat with a short, curved blade worn smooth by time. 6 men dead. Then 7. Then 9. Agnes crouched in the dust beside the old trough, watching death unfold with the same hollow ache she remembered from when her father was hanged for stealing water. It wasn't war. It wasn't vengeance. It was what you did when the law was gone and the world forgot how to care. When the smoke cleared, only 3 men remained. One dropped his gun and fled on foot toward the hills. No one chased him. Another knelt beside a broken wheel, praying into blood-slick hands. Elias shot him clean, merciful. The last was Vex. He stood at the center of the street, duster charred at the hem, revolver in hand. His face was cut down the middle from flying debris. He didn't shake, he didn't scream, he smiled. "You think this ends with me," he said. Elias didn't answer. "I made Mercy what it is. I gave these people teeth. You gave them nothing but old dreams." "You gave them fear," Elias said. "I'm giving them choice." They'll never change, not these rats. They'd eat their own if the sun ran cold. Elias walked closer, boots thudding slow through the ash. Maybe, but at least they won't have you feeding the hunger anymore. Vex raised his gun. Elias fired first. The bullet caught Vex high in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. He groaned, not dead, not yet. He fumbled for his weapon, dragged himself toward it through the blood-soaked dust. Elias stepped on his hand. "No," he said. Vex looked up at him. "Do it." Elias knelt, took Vex's gun, and tossed it into the burning debris. "Why not?" Vex hissed. "You killed the rest." Because mercy doesn't mean letting monsters live. It means choosing how they die. Then Elias took the knife from his boot and slit Vex's throat slow, watching the light drain from his eyes like dusk falling over the mesa. He stood in the smoke. The wind picked up again. The fire died down. And Mercy was quiet. The next morning, Elias buried the dead with his own hands. He dug 12 graves, even for the ones who tried to kill him, even for the boy who fired first. He didn't speak over them. He didn't mark the graves. Only Vex's grave bore a symbol, an old, rusted sheriff's star pounded into the soil like a nail. The town didn't thank him. They watched from their doors and windows, stunned into stillness. Mercy wasn't used to salvation. It didn't know what to do with a man who killed to give something back. For a while, Elias stayed. He repaired the schoolhouse roof, cleaned the blood from the desks. He taught 3 orphaned children how to load a rifle and plant beans in the same day. Agnes joined him. She boarded up the saloon ruins, turned the bar into a co-op for goods. She didn't speak much about the past. Neither did he, but they worked in silence that meant something. Once a preacher passed through. He asked Elias if he believed in God. Elias said, "I believe in consequence." By the end of summer, things began to grow again. The wells ran clearer. The wind softened. But peace is a fragile thing in a place that's seen too much blood. And Elias knew it wouldn't last, not forever. It started with smoke on the horizon, a black coil rising slow from the east over the broken ridge where nothing but dry scrub and bad memory grew. Elias spotted it first, standing at the edge of the old schoolyard, one hand resting on the worn grip of his Colt. The children behind him were drawing in the dust with sticks, their laughter the only sound that hadn't yet learned to fear again. Agnes came up beside him, squinting into the haze. "Riders." He nodded. "Too many for traders." "Bounty." Could be worse." They came before sundown, 13 of them. Hard-looking men in weathered dusters, rifles slung, faces half-wrapped in scarves like they were hiding from more than the wind. At the front rode a woman with a crooked hat and a jagged scar that ran across her jaw like a strike of lightning. Her name was Calder. No one knew where she came from, only that she'd ridden through towns in New Mexico and Sonora, leaving nothing but burnt wells and butchered livestock. She didn't come for coin. She came for silence, the kind that settles after every witness is dead. Mercy had never seen her before, but she knew Elias Finch. She dismounted in the middle of Main Street, looked around like she was inspecting a claim no one had staked yet, and spat in the dirt. "Which one of you is him?" she called. Elias stepped forward without a word. Calder grinned. "Heard you killed Sela's Vex, that true?" "It is." You looking to die slow or quick? That depends on what you're selling. She laughed, a dry, sharp sound with no mirth in it. I ain't selling, sweetheart, I'm collecting. You put a hole in the wrong man's empire. Vex had a brother in Las Cruces, puts gold behind grudges. Agnes moved behind the trough again, rifle tucked under her arm, watching. Calder's men spread out like wolves, not charging, waiting, tension pulling the air taut. I'll give you a choice, Calder said. Step out here. Let my boys carve you open nice and clean, or we burn this pisshole to the ground and hang every child that ever called you teacher. Alias didn't move. Whole town dies for your past, she said. That what you want? The silence in Mercy was heavy now, folk peeking through curtains. A few holding weapons with hands that weren't ready to hold them again. Elias stepped down the steps of the schoolhouse. Agnes whispered, "Don't. I have to. Let me. No." He walked until he was 10 feet from Calder. The two of them stood alone under the scorched sky, the whole town watching from behind walls and doorways like ghosts. "You want me," Elias said. "Come take me." Calder tilted her head. "You got a death wish." "I already died once, in this town, long before you came." She nodded to her men. Two charged first, straight at him with knives drawn. Elias drew and fired, one shot, then two. They fell in tandem, mouths open in surprise, blood already soaking their shirts. Then the street exploded into chaos. Agnes opened fire from the store rooftop, dropping a third man clean through the spine. Another townsman, a half-blind carpenter named Ivers, fired buckshot from his doorway, wounding a rider who tumbled from his saddle screaming. Elias didn't wait for the rest. He closed the distance between himself and Calder, ducking low behind a broken wagon as bullets flew. One of Calder's men lit a torch and hurled it onto the schoolhouse roof. Flames caught fast. Elias saw it out of the corner of his eye and cursed under his breath. He had no time to save the building. He moved toward Calder, firing as he ran, dropping two more men. A bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him sideways, but he stayed upright. The pain made him feel alive, the kind of alive you don't get from peace or prayer. Calder reloaded behind the water trough, crouched and calm. Elias caught her across the side of the head with the butt of his revolver before she could rise. She fell back, dazed, but rolled and came up with a knife. They fought like wild things, no elegance, no rhythm, just fury and survival. She slashed at his ribs. He blocked with his forearm, took the cut deep, grabbed her wrist and twisted until she screamed. She bit his cheek, drawing blood, and he slammed her head into the dirt. Her knee found his stomach, and they broke apart, breathing hard. "You don't get to win," she hissed. "Not you." "I don't need to win," Elias said. "I just need to end this." She came again, blade high, and Elias stepped inside her reach. He stabbed his own knife under her ribs, slow and deliberate. She gasped once and collapsed. The fight didn't stop, not yet. 5 riders remained, cornering Agnes by the trough. She shot one through the eye before the hammer clicked empty. Elias dropped another, then another. The last 2 turned and fled. Elias didn't chase. He knelt beside Calder's body. Her eyes were open, glassy, fixed on nothing. The schoolhouse burned behind him. Children and townsfolk huddled at the far edge of the yard, watching with wide eyes and soot-darkened faces. Agnes came up behind him, pressed a cloth to the gash on his arm. She didn't speak. Neither did he. They buried Calder outside the fence, no marker. Just stones piled to keep the coyotes off. Elias stood at the grave until morning. He didn't sleep. The town didn't either. By dawn, the fire had gutted the schoolhouse. What was left smoldered in silence. Elias turned to the crowd, bloody and half-broken, and said, "We build again." And the people of Mercy believed him, because they had seen the kind of man who stood when everything else fell. They built again. Not out of hope, not out of faith, but because to do nothing was to admit they were still dying. And Mercy had done enough dying. Elias cut timber from the low ridges north of town. Others followed. He didn't lead with speeches. He led with bruised hands, sunburnt shoulders, and silence that asked no praise. They raised a new schoolhouse beam by beam. A single-room frame with thick walls and a tin roof, squared solid against the coming winter. No one called him sheriff. He never took back the badge. But they looked to him when things broke. They looked to him when travelers passed through, when strangers lingered too long near the horses, when shadows pooled in the alley behind Agnes's store. He never ordered. He only showed up, coat buttoned, rifle in hand, quiet as scripture. One night, 3 men tried to steal from the old co-op where the saloon had once stood. They were hungry, desperate, all of them younger than 20. Elias caught them. He didn't shoot. He sat them down, made them eat under watch, and sent them on their way in the morning with a bag of flour and a warning. The town watched, not because they feared what he might do, but because they didn't yet understand why he hadn't. A man like Elias Finch, they thought, didn't forgive. Agnes knew better. She'd seen the grave he dug behind the schoolhouse. Small, unmarked, where he buried the bloody duster he'd worn through the worst of it. No body in it, just cloth, soaked in things that wouldn't wash out. That was the grave he visited most often. She caught him standing over it some evenings, head low, like he was listening for something under the dirt. Fall came hard. Wind swept through Mercy like a reckoning, tearing roofs and dragging heat from the bones. Crops failed again, and the well near the blacksmith's dried out for good. Coyotes came too close at night. People started locking their doors tighter, speaking less, not out of fear, just exhaustion. And still Elias stood. Until the rider came. A girl, no more than 12, rag-wrapped and barefoot, bleeding from one foot, walking behind a sway-backed pony too sick to carry her. She collapsed at the edge of town with nothing but a name scrawled in charcoal on a hide scrap: Lantern Ridge. The ridge sat 30 miles west, across shale flats and scrub so dry it shattered underfoot. It had been dead since the raids 2 winters ago. No law, no water, a place people passed by without stopping, like it might swallow them whole. They brought the girl to Agnes. She stitched the torn sole, gave her bread, water. But the girl didn't speak, not until Elias came in. Her eyes locked on him like he was something from a tale. She reached out, grabbed his coat with both hands, and whispered one word. "Help." He asked no more than that, didn't press, didn't need to. She had blood on her neck and old bruises down her arms. That was enough. Agnes followed him out as he saddled the roan. "You go out there, you might not come back." Elias pulled his coat tight. "I'm not the one who matters." "You've done enough," she said. "You gave them a reason to live. Then maybe I'm still owed one more." He didn't say goodbye. He rode out into the wind, alone. Lantern Ridge sat hollow under a sky stained red with dusk. Elias rode in slow, past burnt wagons, bones scattered like dice across the dirt. He found tracks, boot prints, small ones and heavier steps dragging behind. 5 men, maybe 6. Their trail led toward the mine head, the shaft black as a throat in the hills. He went in alone. The dark swallowed him quick. He moved by memory and instinct, hand on the cold wall, gun drawn. The stink of rot hit first. Then the sound, chains scraping, a whimper too small to be grown. He found them in the 3rd chamber. 4 men, 2 of them drunk, one asleep with a knife on his lap. The last watched a girl tied to a post, no older than 10, her mouth gagged, eyes wide and wet. Elias didn't hesitate. 3 shots, then 4. One man reached for a pistol. Elias shot him through the wrist, then the chest. The drunk tried to stand. Elias crushed his windpipe with a boot heel. The last begged. Elias cut his throat open in silence. He carried the girl out. She clung to him the whole way, silent but shaking. By the time they rode into Mercy again, snow was falling. The town gathered without being called. Agnes stepped forward, coat over her shoulders, lips pressed tight. The girl slid down from the saddle, barefoot again, walked straight to her. "She's yours," Elias said, "or she will be if you're willing." Agnes nodded, took the girl's hand. Elias stood a moment longer, watching the rooftops, the lanterns, the hush in the air like the town itself was holding its breath. He didn't smile, but something in his face softened. "You'll stay?" Agnes asked. He looked past her, toward the ridges, toward nothing. "No," he said, "I'm not needed now." "You are." "I was." And that was all. He left before sunrise, the frost thick on the earth. No one heard his horse go, no one saw the trail. Some say he died out there, alone in the hills. Some say he wandered until he found peace in another dying place, made it live again. But in Mercy, they kept a place at the table, a small marker in the churchyard that read only, "He stood when others fell." And though the town still bore its scars, still lost crops, still feared drought, it never forgot the man who reminded it how to fight for something better. He wasn't just another cowboy. He was the last good man in a dying town, and for a while, because of him, it lived.